Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and I'm here with Saadia Faruqi. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did. Hi.
Okay, good. I wrote notes to say it just right, but I wanted to double check. I'm so excited that you're here with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Well, I heard about Saadia in Oprah magazine. Had read an article about her that she kind of unintentionally, it sounds like, became a voice for Islam. Would you say, is that a correct way to say it? Did you unintentionally, not exactly what you had planned?
Oh, it was not at all what I had planned and was not prepared for. But when duty calls, you have to answer, I suppose.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that to start off with. How did that come about, and how did you become this voice for Islam and kind of a representation and making people aware?
Well, I was volunteering for my mosque, and before that, I had not been part of a mosque community, and 9/11 had come and gone, and I'd been very disturbed by obviously what was going on. But then I moved to Houston, and I became part of a community that wanted to do something, but they really didn't know what to do. And so I started just volunteering as a person who would maybe go out and speak to people, invite some ladies to from a church to our women's group and see if we could get a conversation started. And it really was just like drops in the bucket. And I did not realize when that bucket overflowed, I suppose. I started writing articles about Islam for a local newspaper and a blog online. And so it was just little things that led up to this big thing that I got profiled in the O magazine for, which was that one day out of the blue, I got a call from our local Houston Police Department saying, would you be interested in training our officers? So it was not at all something I had planned or was expecting, but it had been several years in the making, and I felt confident enough to do that big project.
I love it. I love how things just all kind of came, just a little bit at a time and kind of fell into place for you. So tell us a little bit more about you, about your background, about where you're from, and things along those lines.
Yeah, sure. People look at me and the first question they invariably ask is, where are you from? So I think anybody who's different looking gets that question. And so I'm happy to answer. So I was born in Pakistan. I grew up there. I immigrated to the US in my very early 20s. I got married, and that's why I came here. And been here ever since. It's going to be 20 years now. So it was an interesting kind of shift for me where I came here as an adult, so didn't really have a lot of, I had a lot of cultural baggage with me and not a lot of, I found everything different and everything interesting, and I was ready to embrace it. And so that's a good thing, I believe, for people who come to this country, which, we call it a melting pot, but I don't know what in some cities it is, in some cities it's not. But it's an interesting experiment, at least for people who kind of leave everything they have and come somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point, because sometimes it really is not a melting pot. Sometimes things stay very separated, and I think that's human nature. We want to be around people we're familiar with and people that we're comfortable with, but sometimes people do stay kind of separated culturally, and we even see that. As I've prepared for this call and thought about this call, I've thought a lot about school pickup. And there are a few Muslim women Muslim moms, I should say, in my son's grade. And right now, my kids walk home from school, so I don't see this. But when he was in kindergarten and I was doing the kindergarten pickup, I would see this group of Muslim moms would kind of hang out together. And I was always interested, like, I don't know, intrigued and wanted to get to know them. And they would be, I don't even know where they're from, which is terrible of me, but they would be speaking a different language. And I never knew how to kind of break into that. And I know their kids are great. But like you say, sometimes it's not a melting pot. Sometimes we do kind of stay separated, which I feel like is such a exciting thing for me to be able to have this conversation with you and kind of break down some of those barriers, both for myself and for the people who are listening. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit, as you go around and you speak, talk to us a little bit about the things that you tell other people, particularly the things you tell other women and other moms. What do you want people to know about Muslims?
Well, the story you brought up is interesting because a lot of people don't know that, or maybe they don't realize that, although it should be common knowledge that Muslims are from all over the world, and there are many people who are from right here. I mean, they might be white, they might be African American. Actually, until a few decades ago, African American Muslims were the largest group of Muslims in the United States, and that's just very recently been taken over by immigrant Muslims like myself. So it's when you see a Muslim, you may not even recognize them until they tell you what their faith is. But if there's a group of women who are hanging out together, I may or may not feel comfortable because they might be speaking a totally different language from me. So I'm from Pakistan. If they're from, say, Iraq or Saudi Arabia or somewhere, I would have not much in common with them because, we wouldn't be able to speak the same language. It was, so I think that's one of the biggest questions I get when I talk and when I go to speak, it's mostly answering questions. I do have a presentation, but most of the time we end up, going off the topic or not really following my presentation because I want to give people the chance to ask however many questions they can. And definitely as a woman, the ones I get are very common, like, why do you wear the hijab, the covering on your head? And, what is it like being a Muslim woman in America? What is it like raising Muslim kids? What is it like being a mom? Things like that are questions like that are very common. And so I think at the end of the day, my goal for whatever kind of work I do is to show the shared humanity. I'm a mom just like you. I have kids just like you. I have the same worries when they go to school. I have the same, headaches with homework and all this kind of thing that everybody else does. And so if we can just get that across, somehow it really, you seem to forget what somebody's wearing or how they're praying or, what language they speak.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, those things don't matter that much when you connect with the person. Of course, we all have differences, but when you see that we're all people, then that's what really counts. Now, going back to those frequently asked questions, I want to know the answer to all those questions. I wonder if we can get into those a little bit, because I think that is, that would be some interesting stuff to cover. And one of the reasons that I really would like to talk about the answers to those questions is because maybe we don't feel comfortable if we do meet a mom at the school and she's a Muslim and we're wondering and we're curious, well, why do you wear that? And how is it to be a Muslim woman and a Muslim mom? And maybe we don't get to that level of conversation when we're just saying, oh, the weather's warm and how is your kid liking Mrs. So-and-so at the school? And we don't get beyond that. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about what it's like to be a Muslim woman and all those topics.
Well, you're right that it's not something that comes up in just casual conversation. But you would be surprised how many times I get asked questions, all sorts of questions, even by total strangers. And I've written about this a lot. I wrote this recently. I do a lot of op-ed pieces and opinion pieces and articles for a variety of publications. And one of the ones I wrote recently for Texas Observer, which is a local magazine, was about this guy. We were at a Subway restaurant just picking up sandwiches for my kids, and the guy at the cashier wanted to know why I was covered up. And it was interesting because my kids are with me, and I'm in a hurry and everyone's hungry and cranky. And now somebody wants to have this philosophical, religious, not argument. It was a genuine question, but
Right.
really, I mean, I'm not
Discussion,
here
yeah.
to, satisfy your curiosity. I just want my sandwich. And not to mention there are
Yes.
a long line behind us who's also getting, a bit irritated by what's going on. So and that stayed with me because I totally brushed him off. And then when I got out and my daughter wasn't happy with how I had presented it, and she was like, "Mom, you should have explained to him." And I was like, this is not the time or place. Why do I have to be this person who's just always answering questions? I do that pretty much all the time. And sometimes I just want to be a normal person. So you are right that it doesn't come up, but believe me, there are people who will stop you on the road, mall, bathroom, somewhere.
I do believe it. I have to tell you, my husband is 6'10", so
Wow.
very, very tall. And everywhere we go. How tall are you? Do you play basketball or at Walmart? Can you get this thing off the shelf for me? I mean, everywhere we go, people are asking him. So I do understand that there are people who will wonder in silence, and there are people who will definitely just ask. Even if there's a long line behind you at Subway, they want their curiosity, satisfied, and they will ask.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that. I mean, I understand that was just one of those incidents where it hit me where I'm not my own person anymore. And it's not because he recognized me. I've had places where I've gone and people have recognized me, and then that's a longer conversation that I have. But I realize that sometimes you are the only person who can answer a question that might have been bothering another person. And then you have a choice. Do you want to answer it, or do you want to just walk away? Which I know a lot of people do. I've had people come and say, well, somebody asked me that and I just pretend I don't know English, which is, a common thing.
Right.
A lot of Muslims pretend they're just, they don't want to have this conversation. So I'm just going to act like I'm Mexican or something. It's very common. All throughout college, I totally pretended I was Mexican. So it's very, it is. You'll hear that a lot. I mean, it's not funny for us because we've all done it. Where, especially if I lived in Florida. I was in college there. So I totally, 3 years, 4 years, I acted Mexican. So I'm not at that stage anymore, right? I can't. And so I guess I'm trying to say is that, for me, every such conversation becomes this thing that I have to debate within myself. Do I want to be the person who finally lays to rest this stranger's curiosity, or do I want to walk away? And who knows, he might never ask someone else, or who knows, he might go to a website or ask somebody and get totally incorrect information.
Very true.
So I do feel this burden, and most of the time I'm pretty nice and happy about answering questions. But so you asked me about what it's like to be a Muslim mom and a Muslim mother, and I suppose it's the same, I would say, except for the fact that I feel that other people treat me a little bit differently than they would another mom. So it just ends up being the interactions are a little heavier, a little bit where, my children are growing up and they don't necessarily want me involved because of the perception that they have. They're American, they're growing up here, and so a lot of times they have similar perceptions to me than the outside world, as the outside world does, and that to me is very interesting. I mean, I'm a student, I study human nature, and so it's always interesting when, for example, my daughter, the one time in a grade, not now, but maybe in second grade or first grade, said, "I don't want you to come to volunteer because you're wearing that and everybody looks at you, so don't come to school anymore." And I'm like, why? Well, I'm just your mom. Just, what is it about me that why would you be embarrassed? So it's interesting. I understand their point of view. It's a thing that I hope that my children will look at me and kind of see that I am strong in the face of whatever I get. Whether I'm walking down the street and somebody shouts something that's disrespectful, I get that and things like that. It's just, I suppose, just presenting yourself in a way that will teach my kids something, that they can learn something and say, well, my mom was strong enough to do this, and she went out of her way to help people understand, so I should too.
That's beautiful. It makes me sad, and yet I can see myself in it. I see, I see myself not being as inclusive as I could, and I think that part of that comes from a fear. And we talked about this a little before the call, but I think, in the media, and anytime there's something bad that happens, if a Muslim is involved, then immediately the word is terrorist, where,
absolutely,
if it's not, then we don't necessarily hear that word, even though it's, even if it's the same thing, even if it's a shooting and it's a bad guy, it's like, oh, that crazy guy did this. But if it is a Muslim, it is a terrorist attack. And I think that the way that the media portrays it has definitely put a fear into a lot of people. So for people who are, looking through the eyes of fear, what would you say to those moms?
I think my response is also to this particular question. It's not a new question. As the response that I would give has also kind of evolved over the years. I think before, when I started doing all the speaking and writing, I didn't have children. And so I have grown and I have watched my children, and it's very much different response now than probably 10, 20 years ago. You're absolutely right. The media has skewed our the portrayal of Muslims. There's a lot of research out there that if you just go on Google and type Muslim stereotypes or stereotypes about Muslims, there's hundreds of studies now that have been done that show this. And honestly, the only way that you can get rid of those kind of reactions is if you actually get to know people. And that is true not just of Muslims. That is true of any group that has stereotypes attached to it. So, everybody, whether whatever group we belong to, racial group, gender, age, ethnicity, we all have certain stereotypes. And I always encourage people, get to know a person from that group. And then you will get over the fear, because you will be able to say, well, I know this one, and she's not like that. So maybe what everybody's saying on the media is not really that accurate. Most people who have fear don't really know people from another group. And that's really, a lot of research shows that. Huffington Post recently did a research that showed that people who said that they fear Islam or hate Islam, and then they were asked a follow-up question, do you know any Muslims? And they all mostly said no. So, fearing something that you don't know is very common, and we've been going through it since the Adam and Eve, I suppose. But when you have kids, I think that it's a little bit of a different worry and a little bit of a different response. So I don't want my children growing up with this fear. I saw my son, he was severely bullied, and they get things happen to them, or kids say things to them, just political issues or these, like you said, terrorist attacks that come up. And then the next day the kids go to school and they're facing this fear. And in that case, I would tell people to at least keep their opinions to yourself, because it's not fair for children to hear what parents are saying. You might be worried. You might be thinking, well, this is what's going on in our world. But when our kids are listening, they're not really understanding all of it. But when they go out to their schools or to their friends, they might be behaving in a way that's really hurtful to others. So it goes hand in hand, get to know other people, but then also don't share all your loud opinions in a place where kids are maybe not, or sit them down and explain to them. Don't just let them hear things.
Or for that matter, work on yourself. So that your kids, so you don't want your kids to hear those things, but you don't want to, we need to educate ourselves. And like you said, get to know other people, so that when there is, say, a terrorist attack of something, we read something in the media, and we're not saying, oh, those Muslims did another terrorist attack. We're saying, this lone guy did this thing, if we're even talking about it in front of our children at all. But we need to be careful in how broad we make our words and how broad we make that statement, and to make sure that we are not perpetuating any kind of stereotypes, and that's not in us. Because even if we're not trying to say something about another group of people, if that's our belief, it comes through. It comes through in our words. It comes through in our actions. If we
absolutely,
and our kids will see that. If we are talking to all the other parents, but we don't talk to that group of Muslim women over there, they pick up on stuff like that. And it's something we definitely need to be aware of. And, sometimes our kids help us be aware of that. And they will even say things like, hey, why did you do this? Or why didn't you do this? And call us out on stuff, which can be really good for us. But I think that if we want to, if we can see that, I think we can all, as moms, we can appreciate that. And it hurts our hearts a little bit to hear your son was bullied. And because none of us want that for our kids. None of us want our kids to be bullied. And then if we can take a step back and say, well, what am I doing in my home? What am I saying? What am I teaching my kids that would lead them to think that it would be okay to bully another kid? I think that it's hard, that kind of introspection, but I think that it's important too that we recognize that a lot of our opinions are passed on to our kids.
Absolutely. And getting information is so important. I mean, I can hear when my son or other Muslim friends that I have whose kids are even older, they're in middle school and high school, and the comments that these kids get from their peers are so obviously uninformed and ignorant. I mean, they're probably coming from parents or from the television. And it's sad because most of the Muslim kids are like, you don't even know what you're talking about.
Right.
My son will laugh and he'll say, oh, this friend in my class, he keeps singing Allahu Akbar, and he keeps making these gun noises. And my son laughs because many people don't even know that Allahu Akbar is a prayer, and we say it all the time. It's a beautiful prayer. And so it's to the person who's trying to tease you or bully you, saying these things, the kid who is in like my son is looking at him going, are you dumb? What is wrong with you? It's very heartbreaking that our bullying, the kids who bully also do it just because they hear something. They don't know what it is. And that squarely lies on the parents. The teacher's job is not to teach kids manners or anything like that. It is the parents' job. And, when you hear things, be critical, try to get information from a lot of sources. When I do trainings like at colleges and things, I teach people how to get their information. I say, well, don't just watch this one channel, watch a variety of channels, read a variety of newspapers so that you get a more all-rounded kind of view of anything that happens, not just this one topic.
Yeah. And, I am a Mormon, and I would say that's true for any religion. Like, people think the craziest things about Mormons,
Absolutely.
We get all kinds of crazy things. And that's the same. Like, well, of course, if you go to an anti-Mormon website, you're going to hear all kinds of crazy stuff about Mormons that's not true. So like you said, you want to get your information from a good source. So we are about out of time, but in the final moments that we have, I want to ask you, for people who are scared and who have read some of this anti-Islam, literature that's out there that says, oh my goodness, I just forgot the word. What is the word? Oh, jihad, right? That I have heard that means that this is a holy war. And you said that's not what it means, right? Tell me a little bit about jihad. what's people's perception of that is and what it actually means.
Sure. I mean, and it's such a deep topic. I know you don't have time, but I would encourage people to kind of do some research on it. Jihad is an Arabic word that means struggle, and it's typically meant an internal struggle for the sake of God. So if I'm taking time out of my schedule to go and speak about some topic related to Islam, that is my jihad. When my kids are sick and I'm taking them to the doctor, that could be jihad. When I was studying and my kids were little, it was really hard for me. Education is often a jihad. So jihad is really just an internal struggle that you put upon yourself as a Muslim or as anybody to make yourself a better person and to please God. Now, a person who's got violence on his mind can think that by hurting people, that is their jihad. It's just, if you speak English, the word struggle can be anything to anybody. So if a person is thinking that going out with a gun and killing somebody is my struggle that will please God, that's in their mind. That doesn't mean that that's what the word struggle only means. And similar to that, these are words. So we can use words any way we like, but in Islamic theology, it's always been understood by anybody who's Muslim that this is what jihad means. Allahu Akbar, Allah is the Arabic word for God. If you are an Arabic speaker, no matter what religion you are, if you're Mormon and you lived in Saudi Arabia or Iraq, you would say Allah instead of God, because that's just the Arabic word for God.
Right.
And Akbar means high. So when we say Allahu Akbar, it means God is the greatest. That's it. We say it hundreds of times in our prayers. We say it whenever something good happens. And so these terrorists or anybody with a violent mindset kind of uses these terms, but they're the ones that get amplified in the media. So when the media says he's saying this is his holy war, it's his jihad, the rest of us normal people are looking at like, what? How can it be a jihad to hurt somebody? That's like against the teachings of Islam. But somebody is doing it, and he's got the microphone, and he's got the camera trained on him, and he's got everybody talking about him. So that's what you hear. And nobody hears me or, just the random Muslim mom whose child goes to the same school as yours. So that's the people that you have to listen to.
I'm so glad you said that. Okay, I love that because that is what we hear. We hear like, in my perception, like jihad is like, ooh, bad, those are the guys.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's not fair. That's not right. That I love how you described it. It's an internal struggle. And just because someone is using this in that way and skewing what they believe does not extend to all of Islam. That's not how it works.
Absolutely not. And those are beautiful terms that actually are very, close to the heart of all Muslims. So, and they've kind of been taken away from us. Where now I can't use that term anymore because it has such a negative connotation.
Right.
But these are all terms that are very important to us religiously and traditionally. But they've we like to say they've just been hijacked by these group of evil people, and they've kind of changed and twisted the meaning to suit their needs, and they're the ones who everyone is listening to. They're the ones who everyone is paying attention to.
So true. Well, I have appreciated this conversation so much, and like you said, you're just a normal mom. I love it. It's just this conversation between two normal moms. And I hope that for my listeners that this has given you and definitely given me a broader view of like, we're all just people. We're all just normal moms and we can talk to each other and we don't have to have that fear. And I love it. So Saadia, thank you so much for being here on the call today.
Thank you for asking such great questions.
Oh, thank you. And thanks everyone for listening to Moms Who Know. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. A special thank you to those of you who have reached out, those who have shared the show, the people who have recommended guests, and those who have left reviews on iTunes. I just want you to know I appreciate it so much. I'm so glad that we are building a community and that you are a part of it. At this time of year, things get really busy. So I wanted to remind you to get online and get your copy of Real Food Fast from Tiffany at Don't Waste the Crumbs. She will help you save money and make the dinner process go a lot smoother. To get that, you're going to go to grocerybudgetbootcamp.com/moms who know.